Yeah, I tried starting my stream and then it closed, and then I was able to resume, so that's good. So just gonna do some breakfast here. Oh no, that's not right. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Eating breakfast. Okay. And then that's there. It wouldn't let me do a poll last night. Sometimes the button's not there. I don't know why. I think it's my cell phone. My cell phone just has this general malaise or something like that. It's just like not great. It's already 8:35. I need to like kind of hustle, and I'm not really in a hustling way. Let's see here. Okay, this is 9 minutes.
Worldview was put on national television in night. Clash between the free market socialist worldview was put on national television in night.
I can't. There's no video.
Clash
There we go.
between the free market socialist worldview was put on national television in 1979. When a talk show host tried to give Milton Friedman a moral lecture for supporting capitalism.
When you see around the globe the maldistribution of wealth, the desperate plight of millions of people in underdeveloped countries, when you see so few haves and so many have-nots, when you see the greed and the concentration of power, did you ever have a moment of doubt about capitalism and whether greed's a good idea to run on?
This question is loaded with faulty presumptions.
Yeah.
First, it implies that inequality of wealth is a distribution error, as if some past equality was the norm and a system was created to make some people rich at the expense of others. Second, it takes this inequality as evidence of injustice, as if to be fair means to be equal, except there are countless other traits that are not factored in: intelligence, work ethic, character, likability, and so on. Third, it treats greed as an aberration of capitalism, to which Friedman brilliantly replies.
Well, first of all, tell me, is there some society you know that doesn't run on greed? You think Russia doesn't run on greed? You think China doesn't run on greed?
Take note of why this is such a great response. The interviewer was framing greed as a feature of capitalism. By forcing him to confront the existence of greed in other economic systems, Friedman is bringing it back to its proper place: human nature. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who lived inside a system built on the principle of economic redistribution, was quite right when observing that the line dividing good and evil runs through every human heart, rather than between classes or states. If we consider humans to be the material and the system to be how they're organized, then no system is to blame for defects that are located in the material.
What is greed?
Right.
Of course, none of us are greedy. It's only the other fellow who's greedy. The world runs on individuals pursuing their separate interests.
Thomas Sowell mapped this problem in his framework on constrained and unconstrained divisions, two fundamentally irreconcilable assumptions about human nature that underlie most political and social disagreement. The constrained vision, often associated with classical liberalism and conservatism, holds that human nature is fixed, self-interested, and morally limited. Because humans are flawed creatures by nature, society cannot be improved by changing people. Rather, it must be managed through incentives, institutions, and rules that channel imperfection towards productive ends. The unconstrained vision, found in modern liberalism, progressivism, and Marxism, holds human nature to be malleable and capable of moral and intellectual transformation. Proponents of this worldview believe that social problems are solvable and that informed experts can design policies to reshape man. The fundamental difference between the two visions is that one sees humans as inherently flawed and self-interested, while the other sees humans as intrinsically good and perfectible. What presents itself as a disagreement between the interviewer and Friedman on economics is really an anthropological disagreement. This deeper question about human nature underlies so many policy debates, and it is almost never acknowledged.
The great achievements of civilization have not come from government bureaus. Einstein didn't construct his theory under order from a bureaucrat. Henry Ford didn't revolutionize the automobile industry that way. In the only cases in which the masses have escaped from the kind of grinding poverty you're talking about, the only cases in recorded history are where they have had capitalism and largely free trade.
While I agree with Friedman that the collective often is from a few great individuals, we must not forget that the masses do play a role in that achievement, namely that they don't tear the successful to shreds. As Devin Erickson puts it, the great work is not built by the great man. It is built by the great team, led by the great man, in the permissive place. The permissive place is just as central to the great man's success as his ideas. A culture that celebrates achievement is a precondition for it. The vision the interviewer is expressing, that inequality is evidence of injustice, is the antithesis of success.
If you want to know where the masses are worse off, worst off is exactly in the kinds of societies that depart from that. So that the record of history is absolutely crystal clear that there is no alternative way so far discovered of improving the lot of the ordinary people that can hold a candle to the productive activities that are unleashed by free enterprise.
You can either have a free system or a managed system. Erickson points out why free markets produce better results for the individual and the collective. It's because you can build here without getting beaten to death with rocks for witchcraft, without bribing 11 billion bureaucrats, without being shut out of every opportunity because they have to be given to the glorious leader's third cousin, without being killed by the pre-existing police simply so they can take your stuff.
Reward not virtue as much as ability to manipulate the system. And what does reward virtue? You think the communist commissar rewards virtue? You think a Hitler rewards virtue? You think, excuse me, if you'll pardon me, do you think American presidents reward virtue?
Friedman's questions are rhetorical, again highlighting the desire to cast human fault as a byproduct of the system, but let's answer them anyways. The interviewer is pulling the same trick that all progressives do. He is not comparing present conditions to a long and imperfect past. Rather, he's comparing the real world to his imagined ideal where scarcity and greed are non-existent. Friedrich Hayek explains why social planners not only fail to bring their imagined world to life, but all too often make things catastrophically worse. In his famous book, The Road to Serfdom, Hayek highlights that the planner needs as many people as possible to accept whatever is decided, which means recruiting on the lowest common denominator rather than the highest. The part every politician leaves out is that eventually the plan will require force. Redistributing wealth requires seizing wealth. Because decent people will refuse to enact these coercive measures, the positions inevitably get filled by those who do not refuse. This is why mass movements that champion equality and compassion all too often end up composed of the most resentful and envious. The interview segment ends with Friedman's most important observation. Greed and other sinful dispositions do not magically disappear within the public sector. The same flaws that exist in a CEO driving him to try to monopolize a market exist within the bureaucrat trying to nationalize industry.
Just tell me where in the world you find these angels who are going to organize society for us.
No progressive wants to truly answer this question because it will expose their narcissistic belief that they, and people who think exactly like them, should organize society and the rest of us. That angels do not exist and never have. What essentially planned society gets instead is Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor. In The Brothers Karamazov, Christ returns during the Inquisition and is arrested within a day. The Inquisitor comes to his cell and confesses that the church has spent 15 centuries trying to correct his mistake. Christ offered men freedom. But the Inquisitor believes man is too weak and frightened to carry the burden of responsibility, so he offers them bread and a clean conscience in exchange for servitude. The Inquisitor, much like the Central Planner, does not see himself as a villain, but as merciful. He pities man and comes to the logical conclusion that they'd rather be fed than be free, which, in the case of many, is not wrong. The problem is twofold. First, people typically value comfort over freedom. Second, those who offer to supply safety and comfort in exchange for servitude are often the people you least want to give power over you. Hard times alone do not make strong men. They provide you with a choice, and whether you find yourself stronger or less free depends on the attitude you take toward it.
Really good. Naomi Chan 7238. Hello. Good morning. How are you?
So I'm going to toss up some pictures here. You see there's 3 separate pictures and 3 separate large colored boulders. These boulders are the City of Saskatoon's newest public art project. And they came with a bill to taxpayers for just about $300,000 for 3 large plastic rocks.
We're the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and we are fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. We have got a barn burner of a show because Devin Drover, sorry guys, I love you guys too, but Devin Drover, our Atlantic director and our in-house counsel, is actually gracing us with his presence. He's not stuck in a courtroom somewhere or in an airport. Devin, you've got a great story. Well, not great, but the Premier of Nova Scotia and expenses, there's hotels involved. What is going on with Premier Tim Houston?
Absolutely, Chris, and it's so good to be here to discuss this despite the circumstances. But this week, we came out with a story where we caught Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston billing taxpayers for 5-star luxury hotels and other expenses that cost taxpayers more than $20,000 last year across just 3 trips. So, meanwhile, at the same time, and I think the important context here for our listeners who are not familiar with what's going on in Nova Scotia, we've had the same Premier Tim Houston all year in the last few years say that it's time for taxpayers to tighten their belts. Meanwhile, at the same time, he is refusing to do just that. So I think it's a huge story for Nova Scotia. to see exactly how their money is being wasted, not by just all of the bureaucrats, but also by the man at the top of the food chain.
I'm going to go out on a limb here because I've got family back there. I'm surprised by this, Devin. Generally speaking, I find quite often Atlantic Canadian politicians are pretty careful to not get too big for their britches and waste money like this. It's kind of taken me off guard. Is this making news in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, it's a huge news story, and I mean, there's already been rumblings earlier this year from the opposition NDP. The NDP is the opposition party in Nova Scotia currently. They've been making hay about Houston's constant international travels. He's been traveling way more than any other premier in Atlantic Canada by quite a large margin, especially internationally. And I think it's important too that this story isn't whether the premier should travel. Of course,
Romo
there's gonna be times when,
Hello,
politicians
welcome.
to travel on government
How are you
business.
doing?
The issue really is how he's been spending taxpayer money while he's there. Most Nova Scotians, when they go away for work, they're not staying in 5-star luxury hotels, and I think politicians shouldn't either. That's really at the heart of the story.
Like, doesn't he know that Super 8s have water slides and like hot breakfast and everything? Like, really? May I ask, where is he going? Like, is he flying around in order to save the planet, or is he actually trying to get, I don't know, natural resource deals and natural resource development in Nova Scotia? Like, I guess I have to ask the question because I don't know the answer, which is a good part of this interview. Is this value for money? Like, what is he doing when he's going on these trips?
Yeah, so I mean, the short answer is part of this is he appointed himself as the minister responsible for energy as well as the premier. So some of this work was done with the goal of kind of attracting investment into Nova Scotia. That's always the language they use, attracting investment. I think the jury is out on whether or not this has been effective, and I think we're probably too short away from the time period of these trips. Mostly happened, last year from the summer months onwards. It's too early to tell how effective those trips were. We're not seeing a lot of immediate movement to natural resource development there. So, but either way, the goal may be good. It's really the devil's in the details. And I think, I'd like to get into this a bit about some of these hotel stays. So,
Please.
yeah. So, and I think overall the key message is that hotel choices here were unreasonably and unnecessarily expensive. So we have one here. I'm just looking at my notes. In London, the premier stayed at the 5-star W London Hotel, and this hotel is right into the action in London, which is I understand if the premier has to take meetings and he needs to be accessible. One night alone in this hotel costs taxpayers about $1,270. That is just for one night. And you might say,
just like Devin, this is London, England, to be clear.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, not London, Ontario. Okay.
No.
Sure.
But yeah, one night in London, England, $1,270, and that's a lot of money. Somebody who may not have been to London may think, oh well, maybe it's always expensive in this area. We ran some comparables. There's a Premier Inn on the very same block. This is a 3-star hotel. It's available for less than a third of the price. So if you just add up the time that the Premier was there, he spent about $2,000 more just on this trip in hotel fees because he opted for the 5-star hotel rather than the 3-star Premier Inn.
Okay, can we get into some pictures of this? Because I will say, I haven't been yet, but my daughter's obsessed with Sherlock Holmes, and she wants to stay at the Grand in London. And it only costs like a couple $100 Canadian. And it's a big honking fancy hotel. Like, you're not staying in a shack. So this is outrageous.
Yeah,
it's going $1,000 a night. Come on.
Yeah, let's look at some of the photos here. And I will say they don't look particularly, out of the ordinary, which is what's concerning here, because this is a 5-star hotel. Unlike the next one I'll get into, it just kind of looks like your average Marriott hotel in Ottawa or Toronto, but somehow it costs over $1,000 a night. And I think the Premier has some explaining to do here because, there's certainly no leadership reason for staying at luxury hotels, at least I can see. And when the Premier has mentioned this, or the Premier has responded to this story earlier this week, they said, we do it based on coordination with the RCMP and security. I don't think there's any security reason for this particular hotel over one next door that's less than a third of the price.
Were there like 8 Mounties staying with him? Like, no, I'm asking. Like, is that why it was $1,000 a night? Because this makes no sense.
No, this is just his own expenditure. So it's not anyone else on his team. This is just what he spent. But let's move along to the next line on this trip, or next leg of this trip, which is Milan, where he paid more than $1,800 for 2 nights at another 5-star hotel. This one, though, I think the picture speaks a little further here. This is the rooftop pool that the 5-star hotel has. And on top of the rooftop pool, it has a Michelin-starred restaurant. So we have a 5-star hotel with a rooftop pool and the fanciest of hotel or restaurants, and for over $1,800 for 2 nights. And
Devin, you're going to have to explain to people, like, we're not talking about the Michelin plant in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia. Yeah. What does Michelin star mean? What does that mean?
No.
Yeah, and I haven't ate at a Michelin star restaurant, so maybe I'm not the best guide, but for those who are not familiar with it, this is the international ranking of kind of the top chefs and top restaurants in the world. So for a restaurant to earn a Michelin star review, it often has to go through a lot of really pretentious, expensive work. And I mean, maybe I'll show a couple of the photos here of Michelin star restaurant food to give an idea on the kind of the weird stuff that they serve at some of these places. But that's neither here nor there. The ultimate fact is this costs taxpayers more than $1,800 for 2 nights when there were 4-star hotels nearby at less than half the cost. So again, the Premier is wasting excessive taxpayer dollars here on expensive hotels. And, fundamentally, Chris, leadership starts at the top. The government, rightfully, I think, has been saying that it needs to find savings. For those who aren't familiar, Nova Scotia, like a lot of the provinces in this country, have been racking up billions of dollars in debt every year. Provincial debt is approaching $28 billion, which for a province as small as Nova Scotia is outrageous. And debt interest alone will cost taxpayers more than $1 billion this year. So, I think the government is right, that Houston is right in saying that they need to find savings.
Well, thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Especially thank you for commenting because it gives me something to work with.
The number one most dangerous person in a
I
woman's
won't
life
do-
in every culture that's ever been studied is her husband.
I think I'll do a stream later, sleep stream. I'm not sure if I'll do any streams in between then and now. Yeah. Okay, I'll see your comments in the next stream. Thank you for joining. Bye.